Now, in the spirit of planning, we start with the first draft budget policy statement under the Kenya Kwanza government is outlining priority areas for the regime in the 2023-2024 financial year. And these all amidst the constraints of high inflation locally and a global economic slowdown being projected for this particular year. But let's dive in and look at some key components of this draft budget policy statement, starting with revenue targets. The target is at 3 trillion shillings. And you ask yourself, at a 3 trillion shilling target, how will we achieve that? Of course, the discussion goes all the way back to Kenya Revenue Authority, and this takes me to the second board, where how do we hit this target? First of all, reduction of gaps. That's what the government says. Treasury says that there is a huge gap on value-added tax, and they need to reduce that from 38.9% to 19.8%. How will they do this? Well, through the electronic tax invoice management system. And this is ETIM. So involvement of technology to streamline the sector, that is one aspect of it. Also, there's another gap on matters corporate income tax, and there is a huge gap. They hope to reduce that gap from 32.2% to 30%. And this they will do by integrating or integration of KRA system with the telecommunication companies. So telcos are coming on board to help the government achieve its revenue targets for the financial year 2023-2024. And also another way that they hope to reach this 3 trillion target is expansion of the tax base. Talk about the informal sector, which Treasury says it holds a potential of 2.8 trillion shillings worth of revenue potential, and they hope to tap into that. But let's move on to matters fiscal framework. So we already have the projected total revenue that is at 2.87 trillion shillings. Then projected expenditure, it stands at 3.64 trillion shillings. And we've sung this song, of course. Normally what you budget for, we budget to our expenditure rather is normally way higher than our revenue that we hope to collect, and that brings the deficit, which stands at 695.2 billion shillings. How do we find deficits? Well, we borrow. In this particular situation, funding this 695.2 billion shilling deficit will require both external and local borrowing. From the foreign financing arm, we'll borrow 198.6 billion shillings, that is projected, and domestically we will borrow 496.6 billion shillings. This domestic figure has been a bone of contention. If the government is borrowing so much locally, what is left for the SMEs, for example? Well, that is one of the ever-going discussions we've had in this country. But let's move on swiftly. Allocation. How are we going to spend this money? Well, executive has been allocated 2.13 trillion shillings. Parliament, 39.8 billion shillings. Judiciary, 20.07 billion shillings. These are the three arms of government. Then consolidated fund at 908.8 billion shillings, which will be very critical, and county government at 375 billion shillings. Also, other areas that we've seen allocations, specific areas. Look at agriculture, rural and urban development, 67.67 billion shillings. Energy, infrastructure and IT, 398 billion shillings. General economics and commercial affairs, 33 billion shillings. Health, 148 billion shillings. Education, 580 billion shillings. Governance at 234 billion shillings. And national security at 220.74 billion shillings. The first draft budget policy statement under the Kenya Kwanza regime, saying We're going to hear that 3 trillion shillings revenue mark.